All right, what do we have here? Oh, it's another Razer Blade 15. Actually, this is the 2021 model, and they made a few changes on the inside in terms of hardware. So you now get the new RTX 30 series GPU paired with Intel's 10th gen processors, a faster screen, expanded connectivity, and that's pretty much it. So what I'm going to do in this video is actually walk you through the different SKUs that Razer is offering with the Blade 15 Advanced series, and also discuss pricing, a few concerns that I have about this thing, and of course, the performance, because that's the most surprising part about this machine. I think we were all here at the team were impressed by what this thing has to offer. So let's take a look at this after a message from our sponsor.
Meet the Viper VP4300 PCIe M.2 Gen 4x4 SSD from Patriot, available in 1 and 2 terabyte capacities for all your data flow with, well, a 5-year warranty, of course. Are we done? No, this cutting-edge PCIe Gen 4x4 controller offers incredible read and write speeds, and it comes with interchangeable low-profile heat sinks to ensure compatibility in tight spaces. That explains this. Check out the Viper VP4300 down below.
All right, so the first thing I want to tackle is the different configurations that Razer has for the Blade 15 Advanced lineup, because they just have a lot going on right now. So it starts at $2,500, and for that, you get the 10th Gen Core i7-10875H CPU with 8 cores and 16 threads, 16 gigabytes of RAM, a 1 terabyte NVMe SSD, an RTX 3070 GPU, along with a Quad HD 240Hz IPS type display. Do note that this is a sample that I have over here. Now for an extra $100, you can get a faster 360Hz display, but that's limited to 1080p. Now if you're looking for an RTX 3080 8GB GPU, that's going to cost you $2,900, but that also doubles the memory and you get the same display as the entry model. And if you really want to pay $3,000, guys, you can get the 1080p 360Hz display. The top of the line spec comes with an RTX 3080 with 16 gigabytes of VRAM, a 4K OLED display at 60 Hz, and the rest of the specs are pretty much identical to the other SKUs that I just went over. And the price, it's $3,300, which is, it's a lot of money, folks. Now, I did compare pricing to last year's spec, and interestingly enough, prices have remained the same, albeit maybe $100 cheaper this time with the entry-level model. But that goes to show that Razer isn't taking advantage of this whole GPU shortage situation that we're facing right now by jacking up the price of their Blade series. So that's good news, but still, this is still very, very expensive. From a design standpoint, absolutely nothing has changed with the new Blade series. It's the same boxy design with the anodized aluminum chassis. You still get the illuminated green Razer logo on the front lid. They've shaved a few millimeters in terms of thickness with the new 15 Advanced model, but it's really not that significant, and it weighs pretty much the same. Even the interior space remains untouched. You still get the same keyboard layout, switches, and per-key chroma lighting. The trackpad is still one of the best that you can find on a Windows laptop, so there's nothing much I can complain about. However, I really wished if the switches were better this time, especially when you compare to ROG's offerings, because I can guarantee you that it's a day and night difference. Take the ROG Zephyrus G15, for instance. It comes with an excellent keyboard with good travel distance, a very satisfying feel when you bottom out, or even the XPS 15 or 17 series. They managed to keep it low profile, and yet it's just very, very satisfying to type on. Whereas if I come back to the Blade 15, it doesn't meet up to those standards, especially considering the price point. Also, given this boxy design, I find it extremely uncomfortable to use this laptop for longer periods of time because the edges around the palm rest area are really, really sharp. They can start leaving marks on your wrists, and it does start to hurt a little bit, and it gets even worse if you use this thing on your lap. So that's something to keep note of. The power cable is an absolute nightmare to work with. The braided cable is just really thick, so if you quickly want to pack this and put it in your backpack, it's going to need some more work, and I'm just not a fan of the power connector. You always have to make sure that it's facing the other side where the cable is exiting, because if you switch it, it's going to cover a USB port. Look, I already mentioned these concerns with my previous Blade 15 laptop. It's just really unfortunate that Razer hasn't taken any measure to address them, because this design is, quite frankly, starting to look boring. And this is the webcam test on the Blade 15 Advanced, and to be honest with you, it is one of the worst quality that I've seen on a Windows laptop, period. I mean, it just crushes the shadows and it just doesn't look that good. The front-facing speakers sound pretty much the same compared to last gen. They haven't really tweaked the drivers with the new series, and they sound okay. You're not going to get the best bass response, especially when you compare it to the XPS 15 and 17. I feel like those laptops have more fidelity with the trebles and the bass. Moving on to the display, and this is an area where I would say Razer has made some improvements. First off, you're getting Quad HD in a 15-inch form factor, and it looks great. It gives you more screen real estate to work with, but some people might find it too small if you scale it to 100%. On top of that, it has a 240 Hz refresh rate, which makes everything from navigating Windows and playing popular AAA titles buttery smooth. And the quality of this panel is a noticeable improvement over last gen. As you can see, it covers 100% sRGB, 88% Adobe RGB, and 99% DCI-P3. So you're really in for a treat if you're editing videos or photos or any sort of content consumption. I think this is one of the best displays that I've come across on a gaming laptop in this caliber, but there's a catch. It doesn't get bright enough. I think the maximum or the peak level that I got was 350 nits from my test, which is lower than some competing laptops. Also, something that I should mention is that as soon as I unplug this machine, there is a weird sort of white boost in the contrast levels, which make the image look so weird. I tried to troubleshoot this, and it turns out that when Intel's graphics sort of kicks in, it sort of adjusts that automatically. So the workaround to this that I found was to disable Optimus and switch full time to the discrete GPU. Another thing I want to point out is that this display does not run at 240 Hz full time. So if you're doing regular desktop stuff, it sticks to 60 Hz. And then if you switch over to a game in exclusive full screen mode, it switches to 240 Hz. And this has to do with NVIDIA's advanced Optimus technology. And I find that really odd because with my previous Blade 15 laptop, which had an RTX 2080 and a 9th gen CPU, I was able to run the screen at 240 Hz full time, whether I was plugged in or unplugged. Now, obviously you can run it at 240 Hz full time if you choose to run the screen with the discrete GPU full time through NVIDIA's control panel, but that's obviously going to affect battery life, so keep that in mind. Port selection is pretty much the same as last year's. So on the left-hand side, you have power in, 2 USB 3.2 Gen 2 Type A ports, a USB 3.2 Gen 2 Type C port that also supports speedy charging up to 100 watts. There's also an audio output. And then if you switch over to the right-hand side, you get Kensington lock, HDMI 2.1, another USB Type A port, Thunderbolt 3, and a full-size UHD card reader, which I'm sure content creators would love. Upgradability is pretty flexible on the new Blade 15. Once you get under the hood, you have quick access to 2 RAM modules. The primary NVMe SSD is actually hidden underneath this bracket, and the drive speeds are really fast. Now, you might be wondering about this bracket and its purpose. Well, Razer has actually managed to add an additional M.2 slot for storage expansion. They've designed this in such a way that you can simply add the second NVMe SSD on top and secure it with the pre-installed screw. So it's kind of like layer style setup, which is pretty cool. Now, in order to create such a slim chassis but keep good enough cooling for the RTX 3070 and even the RTX 3080 operating at 95 watts, a sacrifice needed to be made somewhere, and unfortunately, that had to do with the battery capacity. While a lot of their competitors have moved to higher capacity units, Razer needed to stick with a more standard 80 watt-hour cell in the Blade 15. That, along with a relatively inefficient Intel architecture, means battery life is pretty respectable for a 2020 laptop that's trying to hit a bit short of expectations in 2021. And that's actually pretty evident when you put this thing under heavier load. And as you can see, battery just plunges to just under an hour and a half. Now, before I get too far into the performance results, I do want to quickly talk about the different modes that Razer has built into the Blade 15. You see, instead of sticking with the usual 3 or 4 modes like Eco, Balanced, Performance, and Extreme that you can find on other gaming laptops, they've actually added a little bit more modification with both the CPU and the GPU which I think is pretty cool. So let's check it out. So first off, there's the balance mode, which basically strikes a balance between performance, temperatures, and acoustics. And then when you switch over to the custom tab, there are actually a bunch more options that allows the user to run the CPU from 35 watts in the low state, all the way up to a constant 55 watts when you put that to boost when the GPU is not being used. The RTX 3070 also gets some love, but this time with a little bit less flexibility. So in low and medium settings, the power limit is set to 85 watts, while when you switch over to high, it's actually at 95 watts. And I think that's super impressive because for a laptop this size, you can't really find the competition pushing the graphics power above 80 watts. A great example is the Zephyrus G15 that allows for a maximum of 80 watts even in the highest performance mode. One thing I do need to mention is that the custom medium setting is the default balance mode. Also, do keep in mind that all the benchmarks that you're going to be seeing in this video will be run with the CPU and GPU set to their custom high settings. So let's take a look at how this affects the GPU and gaming first. In terms of power, the Blade 15 does exactly what it claims to do, and that's to deliver a constant 85 watts at balanced or medium and low modes. Meanwhile, the high setting is a bit more interesting since while it did provide a pretty constant 95 watts, there was one area where readings sort of went all over the place. After 3 runs, it kept happening, so I'm guessing it might have been a game asset load or something that caused more power to be moved to the CPU, and a bit of GPU performance was sacrificed. But that's just a theory. Frequencies were super stable too, with low and medium hitting an average of 1350 MHz, while high capped out at about 100 MHz higher than that. It's weird that the power spikes in the high power mode didn't really affect clock speeds, but my theory of game asset loading could explain this as well. One of my biggest concerns over previous generations of Blade 15 laptops was always temperatures, but it seems like Razer does have things under control, at least in gaming. Even though this laptop has its GPU set higher than a lot of the others that I've come across, it actually never made it to 80 degrees. Noise isn't a problem either. Even in the high and boost settings, the fans do pick up speed, but they never became annoyingly loud. Honestly, this is one of the first laptops that I've come across that just doesn't sound like a jet fan set to the highest settings, so that's definitely a positive. Now, there's also something that I want to mention, and that is, while the fans don't get really loud on this laptop, there is a constant sort of whining noise with the Blade 15 under load. I couldn't normally hear it, but if you're sensitive to sort of higher frequencies, it's certainly something to take note of. Surface temperatures aren't that bad either, but there are a few places that do tend to get a bit warm to the touch. Now, are any of them uncomfortable? No. And to make matters even better, Razer doesn't exhaust the Blade's hot air out of your mouse hand like some other gaming laptops. So anyways, what do you get when you combine an RTX 3070 operating at 95 watts in the highest setting with an Intel Core i7-10750H or 10875H? Okay, the naming scheme is still ridiculous. Well, it's one of the fastest gaming laptops that I've come across so far. It overcame the ROG Zephyrus G15, and that thing had an RTX 3080. But that also goes to show that the name of the GPU isn't everything. Give a mobile RTX 3070 enough power and it can match or beat a 3080. Just remember this though, the G15 is also a good $500 cheaper, provided you can actually find one of those rare laptops. But even at 1440p, the Blade 15 Advanced powers ahead in most cases, which should really get you thinking about which model you end up buying from any laptop these days. So now that we've established that this thing's a super impressive choice for gaming, even though you're still paying that Razer Premium, what about real-world usage? Well, let's dive into that and see how the processor behaves in Razer's various modes. And starting with power over time, this is something we love seeing. Every single mode brings something different to the table. Low hits a constant 25 watts, medium or balanced 35 watts, high is 45 watts, and finally boost nails that claimed 55 watt mark without any problem. So expect pretty different performance results from each of them. The frequency curves follow the power readouts perfectly. Would I use the low setting for creative tasks? Absolutely not, since it tops out under 2 GHz, but it does give the lowest surface temperatures and noise, so it's perfect for light loads like web browsing and general office work. Then there's some serious jumps to 2.4 GHz in balance mode or 2.75 GHz in high, and then finally about 3 GHz in that boost setting. Taking a look at temperatures, they are once again super well managed right across every single setting. It feels like Razer's engineers spent a ton of time refining their design, fan curves, and power limits so they could get the Blade 15 to behave so differently depending on which setting you choose. And now let's take a look at some real-world benchmarks. And right away, you can see the challenge that Intel's partners face when using 10th Gen Comet Lake chips in their laptops. While single-thread performance is competitive, there's just no way these CPUs can match what AMD is bringing to the table. And remember, the Blade 15 Advanced costs more than any Ryzen-based laptop in these charts, guys. But the i7-10875H just gets steamrolled again and again and again and again. The only real thing saving the situation is performance in creative apps that are GPU accelerated like Premiere and Resolve. Here, the RTX 3070 and a very good lightly threaded output from the processor combined makes a really interesting solution, but that's actually a pretty typical result for Intel laptops these days. AMD is catching up though. So while the exterior hasn't changed all that much, Razer has improved every aspect of the Blade 15 Advanced since the last time we looked at it. You now get a better display, higher end CPU, RTX 3000 series, operating at 95 watts, and that results in amazing gaming performance. I mean, the numbers really do speak for themselves. The temperatures are under control, no overheating, acoustic performance is also respectable, and the best part is they haven't actually increased the price. But I do have to mention that they still need to make some improvements with this laptop in terms of keyboard switches, maybe redesign that power connector to make it more convenient, and also give us a slightly bigger display, make it 16 by 10 because I think that's becoming the trend these days. And also, this design is starting to get boring. I mean, give us a different color like gunmetal gray and maybe take off that Razer green logo that's LED lit. Give us something that's edged, and I think I would rock that. You see, at this time when price gouging is everywhere, which is a sad reality, it's just really getting harder and harder to build a gaming PC. But it's good to see something like the Blade 15 Advanced resisting those price increases, at least right now. But keep in mind that you still have to pay a premium for it, and if you're looking for cheaper alternatives, the Zephyrus G15 is $500 cheaper, but good luck finding one in stock, because finding Ryzen laptops, that's not easy these days. So on that note, thank you so much for watching, guys. I hope I was able to give you all the information that you needed to know about the Razer Blade 15 Advanced model. Let us know what you think. I'm signing off. Spend responsibly, and I'll talk to you guys in the next one.